The exile. The council chamber was vast, built of black stone and glowing symbols. High above the alien capital, the air inside was cold. Carrying the scent of judgment and fear, the great overlords sat on their thrones, each one taller than any human, their scales glittering under the light. Their voices rumbled like thunder as they passed the sentence. "The human girl is too dangerous," one of them declared. "She is from a Deathworld, a planet of endless storms, poisons, and beasts. No creature born there is ordinary. They are survivors. And survival itself is a weapon." The girl stood alone in the center. Her clothes were torn, her body small compared to the towering aliens, but her eyes were steady. She did not plead, she did not cry. She only clenched her fists. Her silence made some of the council shift uncomfortably. "She cannot stay among us," another overlord growled. "If left alive, she will grow into something beyond control. Throw her to the predators. Let the beasts decide her fate." The decision was final. The guards seized her arms, dragging her through the echoing halls. Outside the chamber, alien citizens gathered, watching with cruel curiosity. Some laughed, some whispered in fear. They all knew what it meant to be thrown into the predator lands. No one came back alive. The girl was taken to the edge of the wild zone. The place was called the Maw, a wasteland of forests darker than night and valleys crawling with apex beasts. It was a prison without walls, a place where death lived in every shadow. The guards shoved her forward. One of them sneered, "You will not last an hour. Deathworlder." The heavy gates behind her closed with a sound like thunder, sealing her fate. She was alone now. The forest loomed ahead, trees twisted into unnatural shapes, their roots like claws. Strange glowing fungi lit patches of the ground, and in the distance, she could hear roars, deep and terrifying. The air itself seemed alive, carrying the scent of predators waiting for their prey. For a moment, the girl stood still. Her heart beat fast, but her face showed no fear. She remembered the words of her father back on Earth. "Fear is natural, but never let it rule you. Look at the beast, and make it see you are not prey." Taking a deep breath, she stepped into the forest. Every movement was slow, careful. The branches above shook as if something enormous was moving through them. The ground trembled under unseen footsteps. Eyes glowed in the shadows, yellow, red, and green. Watching her, waiting, hours passed. Or maybe minutes. Time felt broken in this place. The predators did not rush to attack. They circled her, studying her, as if testing her spirit. Her body tensed with every sound. But she refused to run. At last, the first beast appeared. It was larger than any creature she had ever imagined. Its body covered in black fur with spikes of bone jutting out. Its jaws were lined with teeth long as swords. Its roar shook the leaves from the trees. The girl did not move. She stood her ground as her father's words echoed in her mind. She knew she could not outfight such a monster, but perhaps she could outthink it. Her eyes darted around, spotting jagged rocks, loose branches, and a narrow slope leading down to a pit. The beast lunged, but she rolled aside, quick as lightning. Pain shot through her arm as its claw grazed her. Tearing her skin, she bit her lip to stop a cry of pain. The predator turned, confused that its strike had missed. She grabbed a branch, set it aflame from glowing fungus, and thrust it forward. The creature paused, its golden eyes narrowing at the fire. It snarled but did not strike. Instead, it tilted its head, studying her like a challenger, not a victim. The girl's chest rose and fell as she held the fire high. She was bleeding, exhausted, yet unbroken. She had survived the first attack, and in that moment something shifted in the air. The predator stepped back, not out of fear, but out of recognition. Far away, hidden scouts of the alien overlords watched from the trees, sent to confirm her death. Their eyes widened as they saw her standing against the beast. One whispered, "She should have been dead. How is she still alive?" The girl did not hear them. She only knew this: her exile was not an ending. It was the beginning of something greater. The forest roared around her, more predators moving closer, circling like shadows in the dark. The night was far from over. Her true trial was only starting. and as the gates closed behind her forever, the galaxy had no idea it had just crowned a queen, not of mercy, but of survival. The first hunt. The night in the Predator lands was like nothing the girl had ever known. The air itself seemed alive, filled with strange calls, growls, and the heavy sound of movement in the distance. Every shadow hid eyes, and every breeze carried the scent of blood. Yet she did not allow herself to freeze. She walked slowly, fire torch in hand, her steps deliberate, her mind racing with ideas of how to survive the coming storm. The first beast had not killed her, and that gave her one advantage. Fear was now shared. The Predator had seen her defiance, and the other beasts watching from the darkness were not sure if she was prey or something else entirely. Still, she knew this balance would not last. The predators were testing her, circling, waiting for a moment of weakness, and sooner or later one of them would strike again. As the moonlight broke through twisted branches above, she finally saw her second challenger. It was not as massive as the first, but it was faster, its body sleek, scales shimmering like liquid metal. Its 4 legs ended in claws sharp enough to cut stone, and its long tail whipped back and forth like a weapon. Its glowing green eyes locked on her, and unlike the first predator, there was no hesitation. This one wanted the kill. The girl's body tensed. She held her fire high and tried to stand tall, but the creature lunged with terrifying speed. She barely managed to dive behind a tree, its claws ripping bark as thick as her arm. The shock of its power rattled her bones. She could not fight this monster head-on. She had to outsmart it. Breathing hard, she remembered the terrain. The sloping pit she had noticed earlier was not far away. She knew she could not simply scare this one off. It was too hungry, too driven, so she would need to lead it into a trap. With her bleeding arm pressed against her chest, she ran, not aimlessly but toward the slope. The predator shrieked, chasing after her. Its claws dug into the ground, throwing dirt and stone as it closed the distance. Every second felt like an eternity. Her lungs burned, her vision blurred, yet she forced her body to keep going. She stumbled once, nearly falling, but caught herself and pushed harder. At last, she reached the slope, pretending to trip as she slid down. The predator, blinded by bloodlust, followed without pause. Its weight carried it forward faster than it intended, and when it tried to turn, the loose rocks gave way. The beast tumbled down into the pit with a deafening crash. Its body slammed into jagged stone, howling in rage and pain. The girl did not waste the moment. She grabbed more fungus branches, lit them with fire, and threw them down into the pit. The flames spread across the beast's scales. It roared, thrashing violently, but it was trapped at the bottom, unable to climb the steep walls. The girl collapsed to her knees, her body shaking, not from fear but from exhaustion. Her blood dripped onto the dirt, and yet her eyes remained steady. She had faced not one, but 2 predators, and still she lived. That truth itself was more shocking than the wounds on her skin, but she did not know that she was no longer alone. In the distance, hidden among the branches, more predators had gathered, silent and watchful. They had seen her fire, her cunning, and her refusal to die one by one. Glowing eyes blinked in the darkness, circling her not to strike but to judge, far behind. The alien scouts continued their surveillance. Their voices shook with disbelief. She defeated a clawed hunter with no weapons. She is not prey. She is something else, another whispered. If she survives this night, she will not just live, she will rule. The girl leaned against the rocks, her breath heavy but her spirit unbroken. She looked into the shadows where more predators moved and spoke aloud, though no one was near. Come then, if you will kill me, do it, but I will not run. Her words carried like a challenge across the night. The beasts did not leap, they only waited, testing her courage again, for in the predator lands, it was never the strongest who survived. It was the one who refused to bow, and on that night the exile became something greater. The predators had not yet accepted her as one of their own, but they no longer saw her as mere prey. They had begun to see her as a contender, and that was the first step toward a throne no alien council could ever imagine. The trial of beasts. The forest did not rest after the second predator had fallen into the pit. The night only grew louder, the air heavier with the presence of more beasts. The girl knew she had survived only by wit and chance, but the land of predators never allowed peace. Here, survival was never given. It had to be earned again and again. Her body ached with every movement. Her wounds burned, her legs shook, and her lungs demanded rest, but she forced herself forward. She could not show weakness, not in this place, not with so many eyes following her through the trees. She felt their gaze everywhere, yellow, green, and red glowing orbs flickering among the shadows. Their footsteps were silent, but their presence pressed down like a storm waiting to break. The predators were not leaving. They were not attacking either. Instead, they were circling, testing, watching, as if the wild itself had called a trial and she was the one being judged. She remembered her father's words about fear and courage, and understood them differently now. This was not about defeating every predator by force. It was about showing that she belonged, that she was not prey. As dawn's first pale light touched the forest canopy, the trial began. A deep roar echoed through the valley, answered by another and another, until the trees shook as though the land itself was alive. The girl gripped her crude fire torch tighter, her eyes darted left and right. Then from the shadows stepped 3 predators at once. Not 1, not 2, but 3. Their forms massive and distinct, each one a nightmare given flesh. The first was a hulking beast covered in bone plates, its mouth filled with jagged teeth. Its very breath sounded like grinding stone. The second was sleek and low to the ground, with 6 eyes and claws that curved like sickles. The third towered above them all, a creature of muscle and fur, its horns sharp and long. Together they moved in perfect rhythm, circling her like hunters that had cornered their prey. The girl's pulse thundered in her chest. She raised her fire high, but she knew this would not be enough. Fire alone had frightened one beast, tricked another, but against 3, she needed more than fear. She needed dominance. She forced herself to stand tall, even though her knees threatened to buckle. She screamed, not in terror but in challenge, a raw cry that echoed through the forest. The predators stopped, their heads tilting as they studied her. They expected panic, a futile escape attempt. Instead, they found a human standing against them, bloodied, trembling, but unyielding. Her cry was not the cry of prey, it was the cry of something that refused to die. Still, the beasts advanced, their muscles rippled, their claws dug into the dirt. The girl's mind raced. She remembered the movements of the last predator, how it lunged straight and heavy. She remembered how the first beast respected her fire. She remembered her father's voice telling her that humans win not because they are stronger, but because they adapt. She moved quickly, grabbing sharp stones from the ground and striking them against the fire. Sparks flying into dry leaves and fallen bark, flames spread rapidly across the ground, forming a line between her and the approaching beasts. The predators paused, snarling, the flames reflecting in their many eyes. She lifted her fire torch high, stepping forward instead of back, forcing them to consider her not as prey fleeing, but as a rival advancing. The first beast growled, a sound that shook the earth, then leapt forward. The girl braced, spinning to the side and thrusting the fire straight at its face. The flames licked across its bone plates, making it roar in frustration. The second beast darted low, faster than her eyes could follow, but she had already prepared. She kicked burning branches into its path, and when its claws struck the embers, the sudden flare blinded it, forcing it back. The third predator, the towering one with horns, watched her more carefully. It did not rush like the others. It studied, testing, as if deciding whether she was truly worth the kill. The girl held its gaze, refusing to drop her eyes. She knew instinctively that this was a battle of wills, not just strength. She stepped forward again, her torch shaking but never lowering. Minutes passed like hours. The beasts paced, roared, and lunged, but each time she met them with fire, with cunning, with defiance, she bled. She sweated, her body screamed to collapse. But her spirit held, slowly, impossibly. The predators began to retreat, not in fear, but in reluctant respect. Their growls softened, their movements slowed. They circled her one final time before melting back into the forest, leaving her alive. The girl dropped to her knees. Gasping for air, her body was weak, but her heart burned stronger than ever. She had passed something tonight, though she did not yet understand what. In the shadows, dozens of eyes still watched, but there was no rush, no strike. Instead, there was silence, heavy and expectant, as though the predators had begun to see her as more than just another victim. Far above, on a hidden cliff, the alien scouts continued their surveillance, their faces pale with shock. "This is impossible," one whispered. 3 hunters tested her at once. "And still she stands," another murmured. "It is no longer a punishment, it is a coronation." The girl did not know these words were spoken. She only knew she was still breathing, and that meant she would fight again. She tightened her grip on the fire. Staring into the endless dark of the predator lands, she whispered to herself, "I will not be prey. I will not bow. If this land is my prison, then I will make it my throne." And with that vow the forest answered not with silence, but with a chorus of howls that shook the very ground. The trial was not over, but something had changed forever. The predators had seen her courage, and the Deathworld itself had begun to listen. The unexpected alliance. The morning light spilled through the twisted canopy of the predator lands, painting the ground in sharp beams of gold and shadow. The girl awoke from a restless sleep, her back pressed against the roots of a giant tree. Every muscle in her body throbbed with pain. Her wounds had dried into hard scabs, and hunger gnawed at her stomach. Yet when she opened her eyes, she saw something that sent a shiver down her spine. Across from her, not 20 paces away, 3 predators sat silently watching. They did not lunge, they did not roar, they only stared, their massive forms blending with the forest. Her heart hammered in her chest. She remembered the trial of the beasts from the night before. The predators had circled her, tested her, and pulled back without striking. Now it seemed they had not left her at all. They had followed her, but for what purpose she could not yet understand. Slowly, carefully, she stood, clutching the half-burned torch she had kept alive through the night. The flames were weak but still glowing. She lifted it high, expecting them to scatter, but they remained, unflinching. Their eyes glowed in the half-light, steady and unyielding. The girl realized then that this was not over. The predators were not abandoning her. They were waiting. She remembered how predators on Earth behaved. Wolves, lions, even birds of prey. They did not simply hunt. They observed, they tested, and sometimes they even accepted new leaders when one proved strong enough. The thought seemed absurd, but as she looked at the 3 monstrous creatures before her, something inside whispered that this was not about killing her anymore. It was about seeing if she could belong. She tightened her grip on the torch and stepped forward instead of back. The closest beast growled low, a rumbling sound that shook the earth. But it did not attack. It was warning her, challenging her to either stand or fall. The girl's throat was dry, her hands trembling, but she forced herself to meet its glowing eyes. "I am not prey," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You will not eat me." The predator tilted its massive head, its nostrils flaring as it sniffed her scent. It smelled her blood, her sweat, her fear, and yet also her defiance. Slowly, the beast lowered its head, not in submission, but in recognition of her courage. The other 2 predators stirred, restless, testing the air. Then one of them padded closer, its claws carving deep marks into the soil. The girl froze. Every instinct in her body screamed to run, but she stayed rooted. Her father's words echoed once more. "Look at the beast, and make it see you are not prey." The second predator stopped just short of her, close enough for her to feel its hot breath. Its jaws opened, rows of teeth gleaming in the morning light. The girl raised her torch, pressing the weak flame close to its face. It snarled but did not strike. Instead, it backed away, leaving her untouched. The forest fell into silence, a silence heavy with meaning. Hours passed, and the predators did not leave. Instead, they began to move with her, When she walked deeper into the forest to search for water, they followed, keeping their distance but never letting her out of sight. When she stumbled upon a stream and crouched to drink, they stood guard, their massive forms blocking the path of smaller creatures that might have attacked. At first, she thought it was coincidence, but by the time the sun climbed high above, she knew it was not. The predators were testing her in a new way. They hunted, but not for her. Instead, they brought down a scaled beast with horns like spears, dragging it into the clearing where she sat. The girl's stomach twisted as she realized what was happening. They were offering her food. She approached cautiously, hands shaking as she cut into the carcass with a sharp stone. The predators did not stop her. They only watched, and when she ate, they ate beside her, not as rivals but as members of the same hunt. For the first time, she did not feel alone in the predator lands. She felt the strange beginnings of something impossible, an alliance forming not by words or treaties, but by survival. These beasts, feared across the galaxy, were starting to treat her as one of their own. But alliances were never without challenge later that day. When she tried to rest again beneath the shadow of a broken cliff, another predator appeared, larger and darker than the others. Its hide was scarred with old battles, and its eyes burned with hunger. It had not been part of the Silent Watchers. This one had come to claim the prize. The three predators who had followed her rose as one, snarling, their bodies forming a protective circle around the girl. She watched in shock as the beasts she once thought her executioners now stood between her and death. The larger predator roared and the ground shook, but the three did not move. They stood their ground, their loyalty clear. The girl gripped her torch and rose to her feet. She could not let them fight alone. Together they faced the newcomer. The air grew thick with the promise of violence. The girl's voice rang out, trembling but strong. "Then let it be a trial," she said to the beasts around her. "If I must lead, I will fight with you." The predators seemed to understand. Their roars answered hers, a chorus of sound that echoed through the valley, shaking the trees. And in that moment, the exile became something more, not prey, not outcast, but a contender for a crown no alien council could ever strip away. The fight had not yet begun, but the alliance had, and for the first time, the predator lands seemed less like a prison and more like a kingdom waiting to be claimed. The rise of the queen, the predator lands had always belonged to the strongest. Each beast claimed its dominance through blood and battle, and those who lost were either eaten or driven into the shadows. For the girl, this law was no longer strange. She had lived it every day since her exile, fighting not only for survival, but for recognition. Yet the moment had come when mere survival was not enough. If she was to endure here, if she was to stand as more than just tolerated prey, she had to rise above every predator that walked these forests. The morning after the standoff with the scarred beast, the air was heavy with tension. The three predators who had stood beside her prowled restlessly, their eyes locked on the newcomer. The scarred one was no ordinary hunter. Its body was massive, its hide marked with wounds from countless battles. Its presence carried authority, and the other predators respected it as their warlord. For the girl, this was the final test. She understood instinctively that until she faced this beast, she would never truly be accepted. Not by the predators, not by the land. The scarred predator stepped forward, muscles rippling beneath its dark hide. Its roar shattered the silence of the valley, sending flocks of smaller creatures scattering into the skies. The three who had allied with her lowered themselves to the ground, not in fear, but in submission. They would not fight this battle for her. This was her trial alone. She was being given the chance to stand or die. The girl's hands trembled, yet she did not let the fear consume her. She gripped a sharpened stone in one hand and held her torch in the other. Her voice was low, steady, a whisper to herself, "I will not be prey. I will not kneel." She stepped forward, each step deliberate, until she stood in the center of the clearing with the scarred predator circling her. The beast lunged with terrifying speed. Its claws tore through the soil where she had stood a moment earlier. The girl rolled aside, her lungs burning. Her body screamed in pain from old wounds, but she forced herself up. swinging her torch to keep the beast back. The fire flared, reflecting in its hungry eyes. But unlike the others, this predator did not flinch at flames. It roared and struck again, its massive tail sweeping the ground and knocking her off her feet. She hit the earth hard, the air driven from her chest. For a moment, darkness threatened to swallow her, but she forced herself up again. She remembered every fight she had endured, every beast she had outwitted, and every scar that marked her skin. She was not stronger, but she was smarter. She dragged her feet toward the broken cliffside where sharp rocks jutted from the ground. The predator charged again, jaws snapping. And this time she did not dodge fully. She allowed it to strike her arm, pain exploding through her body. But she used that moment to thrust her torch deep into its open mouth. Flames burst against its tongue, smoke curling from its throat. The predator howled, shaking its massive head. The girl staggered but did not retreat. Instead, she pressed the attack, grabbing the sharpest rock and plunging it into the creature's scarred shoulder. The predator roared in rage, its claws swiping across her side. Tearing flesh, she fell to the ground, blood soaking her clothes, but her eyes never wavered. She pulled herself up again, staggering, broken but unyielding. The forest echoed with silence as predator eyes watched from the shadows, witnessing not prey, not weakness, but a human who refused to bow even in the face of certain death. The scarred beast charged once more, but this time the girl was ready. She led it toward the cliff, its massive body striking against the jagged rocks, and as it stumbled, she leapt, using every last ounce of strength to drive the burning torch into its throat. The predator collapsed with a thunderous crash, its body shaking the ground. Smoke and blood filled the air. Its golden eyes flickered, then dimmed. The girl stood above it, swaying, her body broken and bleeding, yet alive. She raised her bloodied hand high, her cry echoing across the valley, not of prey, but of victory. The three allied predators approached, their heads lowering as they bowed before her, their massive bodies bent in respect. Their roars joined hers, not as hunters but as subjects. From the shadows, dozens more predators stepped into the light, their glowing eyes watching her with something new. Not hunger, not challenge, but recognition. The girl fell to her knees, gasping, tears mixing with the blood on her face. She had done the impossible. She had slain the warlord of the predator lands, and in doing so, she had claimed its place. Around her, the roars grew louder, shaking the trees, rolling across the valleys, until it seemed the whole land bowed to her. In that moment, the exile was no longer a victim, no longer a girl abandoned to die. She was the queen of predators, crowned not with jewels or thrones, but with blood, fire, and the unyielding will of a Deathworlder far above, hidden on the cliffs. The alien scouts watched in silent terror. Their voices shook as they spoke. The predators bow to her. She has become their ruler, another whispered. The council must be warned they tried to destroy her, and instead they have created something far worse. A queen born from the land itself. The girl did not hear them. She only knew that for the first time since her exile, the predator lands felt like hers. She had no chains, no council above her, only beasts at her side and the throne of survival beneath her feet. And as the sun rose high above, her shadow stretched long across the forest floor. Not the shadow of prey, but the shadow of a queen. The predators roared again, their voices a promise to the galaxy, that the Deathworlder girl who had been thrown to die now ruled with the strength of a predator and the spirit of a human. The return of the aliens' weeks had passed since the human girl had slain the scarred predator and claimed her place among the apex beasts. The predator lands, once a place of certain death, had begun to change around her. Her scent now carried authority. Her presence commanded silence, and her voice was no longer ignored. When she moved, the predators followed. When she hunted, they joined her. And when she roared her defiance into the skies, the forest shook with the answering chorus of beasts. She was no longer the girl cast out to die. She was the queen of predators, bound not by chains or crowns, but by respect carved in blood and survival. Far beyond the forest, in the halls of the alien council, whispers of her survival had begun to spread. The scouts had returned with tales so outrageous that many dismissed them as lies. Yet the council could not ignore the unease in their ranks. They had sentenced the human girl to death. They had believed the predators would tear her apart within minutes. But now there were stories that the predators bowed to her, that she ruled them, and that she was no longer merely surviving. She was thriving. The overlords laughed in disbelief, but their laughter was hollow, and their eyes betrayed their fear. At last, they sent a force of soldiers and nobles to the predator lands. Their mission was simple: confirm her death, retrieve her bones if they remained, and silence the rumors that threatened the council's pride. A fleet of dark ships descended upon the wild zone, their engines screaming across the skies. The ground trembled as alien troops marched into the forests, armed with plasma spears and heavy armor, confident in their superiority. To them, predators were dangerous but predictable. They had slain many with weapons, and they believed no single human could ever command such beasts. The girl heard them before she saw them. The sky lit with fire as ships cut through the clouds. The predators around her growled uneasily, their massive heads lifting toward the sound. She felt the forest itself shift with tension. The time had come. The overlords had returned, but they would not find what they expected. She rose from her resting place on the back of the massive horned predator, her body scarred, her skin hardened, and her eyes burning with a strength that had been born of endless trials. She no longer looked like prey. She looked like a warlord crowned by the land itself. The alien soldiers marched into the valley, their boots crushing the earth, their weapons glowing with deadly power. They moved in formation, confident, disciplined. Their leaders sneered as they looked around. "Search the area, find the remains, burn whatever is left," one barked. But before they could move farther, a roar split the air, a sound so loud and so deep it rattled the armor on their chests. The soldiers froze, their weapons trembling. From the shadows of the trees, glowing eyes appeared, dozens, then hundreds. The predators stepped into the light, massive forms surrounding the alien force, cutting off every path of retreat. At their center came the girl, riding the great scar-horned beast she had defeated weeks before. Its wounds had healed, and it bore her proudly upon its back. She sat tall, her body covered in crude armor made from predator bones and hides, her hands steady on the creature's mane. Her eyes met the soldiers unflinching, and her voice carried across the valley. "You cast me to die," she said, her words sharp as blades. "But the predators did not kill me, they crowned me." The alien commander laughed, though his voice shook. "One girl cannot rule beasts. This is a trick. Kill her," he ordered. His soldiers raised their weapons, but before they could fire, the predators charged. The earth shook as the beasts stormed forward. Their roars drowned out the cries of the soldiers. Their claws tore through metal. Their jaws crushed armor as if it were paper. Plasma fire lit the sky, but it was swallowed by the fury of living weapons far older and more powerful than any machine. The girl did not watch from safety. She leapt from her mount into the chaos. Her crude spear raised high, she moved with the predators, striking with speed and precision. Her voice rose above the roars and screams, not as prey, not as victim, but as queen commanding her army. The aliens fought desperately, but their formation collapsed under the sheer force of the beasts. What they had thought would be a simple mission became a massacre. Their arrogance had blinded them, and now they paid in blood. The commander tried to retreat, but the girl cornered him. Her spear pressed against his throat, her eyes burning with fury. "Tell your council," she said coldly, "that the predators of this land have a queen. Tell them that the human they tried to destroy now rules what they fear most." She let him live, forcing him to flee with only a handful of survivors. His escape was not mercy. It was a message. When the battle ended, the valley was silent except for the heavy breathing of predators. The girl stood among them, her body bloodied but unbroken. Around her lay the shattered remains of alien weapons, broken armor, and the silence of defeat. The predators lowered their heads, not as beasts but as subjects honoring their queen. Their roars rose together, shaking the earth, a sound that reached even the ships above. Far away, in the safety of the council chambers, the commander would tell his story. His voice would tremble as he described the girl standing at the head of a predator army. His words would spread like wildfire, igniting fear across the galaxy. The overlords had tried to destroy her, but instead they had forged a legend. The Deathworlder girl who was thrown to die had risen higher than any of them could imagine, and in the predator lands the girl stood tall, her throne the wilderness, her crown the scars upon her body. She was no longer just queen of the beasts. She was a warning to the galaxy that humanity could never be caged, never be broken, and never be prey. The Deathworlder's throne. The council chamber was filled with silence when the surviving commander returned. His armor was torn, his body scarred, and his eyes burned with terror. He fell to his knees before the overlords, his voice shaking as he delivered his report. "She lives," he said, trembling. "The predators bow to her. They fight for her. She has become their queen." The overlords, beings who had conquered countless worlds, sat frozen on their thrones. Their laughter had vanished, their pride now twisted into fear. They had believed humans were fragile creatures, too weak to withstand the galaxy's trials, but now they faced something beyond their comprehension. Rumors spread faster than light. Across trade routes and military channels, the story grew. Whispers of the Deathworlder Queen reached every corner of the galaxy. Some called her a myth, others a weapon, but all agreed on one thing. She had changed the balance of power. The predators, once feared as untamable forces of destruction, now moved at the command of a single human. And if one human could achieve this, what could humanity itself become? Back in the predator lands, the girl stood tall among her beasts. The scars on her body marked every trial she had endured. Her eyes glowed with determination, and her hands carried not just weapons, but the weight of a throne built on defiance. She had no palace of stone, no golden crown. Her throne was the broken cliffside overlooking the valley. Her crown was the respect of every predator that prowled the forests. Her army was the living storm of claws and fangs that now answered only to her. But her heart, though hardened, had not lost its humanity. She remembered her exile, the laughter of the council as they cast her into death, the way they had looked at her as though she were nothing, and she remembered her father's words on earth, telling her that fear should never rule, that courage was humanity's greatest weapon. It was that memory which kept her spirit alive. Even as she ruled among monsters, her rule was not one of cruelty. She did not slaughter without reason. She led the predators with cunning, teaching them strategy they had never known. They hunted with her guidance, defended the lands with her commands, and slowly the predator lands became something more than just a prison of death. They became a kingdom, a fortress of life bound together not by chains but by respect. One night, as the twin moons rose above the valley, a group of alien scouts crept into the forest. They sought to kill her, to end the legend before it spread too far, but before they could strike, they found themselves surrounded by predators, glowing eyes watching from the shadows. The girl stepped forward, her voice carrying across the silence. "I am not your prey," she said. "I am your warning. Tell your council this land belongs to me, and no one will take it again." She let them flee, just as she had spared the commander before, not because she was merciful, but because she understood something greater. Fear spreads faster through survivors than it ever could through corpses. The galaxy trembled at her name. Some feared her, others admired her, and many began to question the council's authority. Rebellions whispered of her as a symbol of defiance. Traitors spoke of her courage as though it were a fire to be carried. Soldiers who once mocked humans now shivered at the thought of facing one. The council, desperate to regain control, debated endlessly. Some argued to destroy the predator lands with fire from orbit, but others knew the danger. If they struck and failed, they would not only face the predators but also ignite humanity itself. If one girl could achieve this, then what could an entire world of Deathworlders unleash? The thought was unbearable. The girl, unaware of their debates, sat upon her cliffside throne. The predators roared below her, their voices a living symphony of power. She looked out across the wild horizon and felt no fear, only purpose. She had been thrown into this land to die, abandoned by those who feared her strength. But she had taken their punishment and turned it into her crown. She had become not only queen of the predators but also a queen of survival, of resilience, of humanity's unyielding spirit. Her reign had only begun. She knew the council would return. She knew the galaxy would not forget her. But she was ready. The predators had chosen her. The land had accepted her, and her heart burned with the fire of a Deathworlder. She whispered into the night, her words carried by the wind. "I will not bow, I will not break. This world is mine, and soon they will all know. Humanity is not prey. Humanity endures." And as the forest answered with the howls of her beasts, the legend of the Deathworlder Queen carved itself into history, not as a tale of despair, but as a story of defiance, power, and the unstoppable will of a human who turned exile into empire. The council had exiled a girl, but the galaxy had gained a queen. The predators had tested her, but they had crowned her. And in the silence of the night, the throne of the predator lands shone brighter than any palace of gold, because it was built not on fear, but on survival. And survival was the greatest crown of all,